As we continue to look at the Middle Ages, we need to give a particular emphasis to the church in the Middle Ages. We're talking about the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, as it dominated Europe. This church is going to allow for blending of cultures in Europe between Greco-Roman, the first bullet says Germanic and Christian traditions. Let's look at a few examples. First of all, when Clovis goes Christian, we talked about Clovis already, so do his subjects. This is common for people to follow their successor. So taking and assimilating what they had been doing traditionally with language, dress, custom, foods, and blending in a new culture, in this case religion. Charlemagne spreading Christianity with the sword. As he overtakes new peoples, introducing them to a new faith, that same practice of assimilation will take place. So whether by choice or by force, Christianity is blending into European culture. And then, of course, another example would be the Holy Roman Empire of the 12th century, as it took on the power struggles between Germanic peoples, Italians, and even Christian leaders. A lot of drama there. So whenever cultures are blended together, it isn't always a seamless transition. Christianity is also a unifying force we can see politically, culturally, and militarily. First example we want to share is people of this time wanted to go to heaven. The harsh realities of their daily life, heaven provided them. The Christians were provided this vision or scene of heaven where all their problems would go away. This was an escape of the harsh realities of medieval life. Secondly, we can see that political leaders saw support from church officials as a way to authenticate or give authority to their positions of power. There was the feudal leaders, the political leaders of the day said to their subjects, to their followers, to do what the church says. And the church, of course, was reciprocating that with do what your leaders say, do what the noble says. So there was almost a sense of collusion there. Thirdly, let's understand that as forces go into battle, there was a sense of righteousness by one's faith. Whose God is bigger? Who does God favor? If they were both of the same religion, if two Christian kingdoms were at odds with one another, the winner, of course, was being favored by God. If, as the course of the Middle Ages, the Crusades, whose God is bigger, perhaps between these Christian and Islamic forces. Popes, of course, leadership of this Christian Catholic Church in Europe held tremendous power. The bullet says position of the popes in absolute power. Why did this happen? The church was seeking to influence both spiritual and political matters. This of course, saw some first steps under the crowning of Charlemagne. There were many motives for this. Power can be intoxicating for leaders, whether it is political or spiritual. When you combine the two, it definitely has that effect. People in power will, with continued support, to be subordinate to those who empower them. So if the Pope is empowering an emperor like Charlemagne, then the Pope feels some type of authority perhaps over that political leader. It says positive impacts for growth of power. So not all bad here, but there can be expansion, and the influence of the faith can be expanded through siding with these political leaders. It can also bring clarity to the church for policy standards. Again, being supported, if the church is saying that this is their doctrine and this is the policy of the church, if there's further support from a political unit, then it kind of brings some clearness to that, or some greater authority as well. And then also there's negative effects. Power corrupts, and we've heard that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Many popes would fail to see the boundaries of their office. The church was recognized by no political superior. I remember the 1054 split. That was a big deal between the Eastern Orthodox Church, who had a political authority, in the Emperor of the Byzantines, whereas the Pope in the West really had no political superior. Also, the church is going to expand into secular matters. matters that had often been handled by secular powers, and in this the lines get blurred. So, what role does religion have to unify and even govern? Example one would be as feudalism and manorialism were dividing a people, the faith of Christianity many times brought them together. Everyone took the same sacraments. Everyone was worshiping the same God in Europe. Another example would be that of canon law. This is the law of the church, and it applied to everyone. And then the third example would be sometimes kings would fight for popes. And example there would be Otto I, and he would be rewarded for that. Powers of the church at its height. The church would do things like be able to deny salvation. The excommunication of an individual from the church would basically tell them they were not eligible for heaven any longer. So people of the Middle Ages would want to try to avoid that. Secondly, the ability to deny sacraments, the interdict as it was known. People needed these functions of the church in their daily lives, things like weddings, things like funerals, things like the ability to confess their sins. And when denied those sacraments, they were seemingly being excluded from the faith. And then finally, the Inquisition. This was a finding of the heretics, the people who were going against the teachings of the church. Driving them out became messy at times. It was dangerous to say anything that wasn't aligned with church doctrine. Very harmful, very torturous ways of death, perhaps. The challenges that would be brought, though, with different religious ideals in Europe would include the creation of orders to emphasize solutions to these problems, the battling of heresy, the spreading of the word through missionary acts, helping the poor. Groups like the Franciscans and the Dominicans would serve those purposes and fill those roles. Also, the building of cathedrals, with honoring God with very lavishly built, ornate structures, first of the Romanesque style, and then later of Gothic. And several attempts at reform would also see this with popes like Leo IX and Gregory VII. Decisions like denying priests the ability to marry, which shows commitment, and the church just simply really acting like a kingdom would all align with that idea. Finally, the final bullet says religious authority between popes and rulers. Plenty of conflict. We've talked about some already. The lay investiture issue, naming of bishops will show dispute, and then of course the resolution that came with the Concordant at Worms. The taxing of clergy issue between Boniface and Philip IV, which would eventually lead to the Great Schism. Various popes simultaneously de-elevating the power of the church. And then the issue between Henry II of England and Thomas of Becket, the Archbishop there of Canterbury, who would later be murdered. All of these issues are about power and who's going to win, who's going to benefit. And the Catholic Church was tremendously powerful body through the Middle Ages and even beyond. I think you have to admit that some of its power was de-elevated as a result of some of these conflicts. All right, thanks a lot. We'll finish up with one more, and then we'll be done with the Middle Ages.